Hey guys, I'm here today with Sue. Sue has a powerful story about her journey to finding the right diagnosis. We were talking casually in conversation, and she's truly a hero. She's someone who has done aerial dancing, loves her pet, dynamic worker. She's from a small town in Ohio called Canton, where basically you kind of tough it up and do what you got to do to move forward. And so that's always been her philosophy in life. So even though things were challenging and not the norm, she just kept pushing and pushing and pushing until one day. So I want Sue to share a little bit about her story with us so that her challenge is something that's so common and can very easily be overlooked. So, just Sue, can you give us some more insight? Tell us a little bit about you. Who is Sue? Who are you?
Oh, thank you, Kelly. Um, I think, an average, ordinary person, and moving my way through life. Growing up in a small town and family in Ohio, and going to school, going to college, getting jobs, and just moving through, right? And then all of a sudden, um, life, normal life as I knew it, just became different. And I say it that way because now looking back, it all makes sense. But at the time, you have these little subtle changes in what you can do, how you can think. Um, I've been very physically active my whole life. And then, in your 30s, 40s, starting to have kind of issues.
What does physically active look like? Did you play sports?
I did. I running, tennis, hiking, biking, kayaking, the aerial dance that you were talking about, um, traveling. It's just always on the go, always moving, always thinking, always learning. I was in school studying, and and then all of a sudden. Um, Everything just kind of came to a halt.
What does a
It's little,
halt look like? Do you mean like a 100% halt or just slow down or
yeah,
disappointing results?
it came to, yeah. I mean, basically, my life, I would try to do the same things that I would normally do every day. And these subtle little things would happen. For example, I started having like little reactions to all the foods that I was eating. I would
What's a
drive.
reaction? Like, tell me a little bit about it. Was it an allergic
Yeah,
reaction, like a rash or nausea or
it was like an allergic reaction. Like I would eat and I would just feel like I wouldn't feel like I was alert. I would feel foggy. I would feel maybe some burning, some swelling, things like that.
was this
Um,
all foods or just any particular food?
I couldn't put my finger on it. It just seemed like every time I ate, I would feel that way. And I started asking some friends around me that knew a lot about nutrition, and they thought that there was probably something to do with how what I was eating. Um, in the, I mean, I mean, moving forward and learning what I've learned, I started to realize that my body was reacting to toxins. And so it really wasn't necessarily the food that I was allergic to. It was a toxin that could have been included in anything that I was eating, if that makes sense. So it was more of a reactivity versus an allergy. But at the time, I didn't know that. I just knew that I couldn't eat right, or I'd be sick to my stomach, or I'd get swollen, or it would, throat would swell. Um,
And when you went to the doctors, what did they initially diagnose it? What did they think?
um, they the first time I went to, there were all kinds of symptoms. One was a lot of pressure in my ears, and then all your senses become hypersensitive as well. So hearing was off, noise, any kind of sounds. Of course, nutrition, the eating was off. So when I went to the physician the first time, um, she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, you're just going through midlife crisis." And she wanted to diagnose
It's all
me.
in your head.
She said it was all in my head. She said she wanted to give me a prescription for some neuropsych medication and to go to a psychologist. And
Really?
yeah, and she said that this was menopause. And then I had little tears that went down my face because I used to work in the medical system. And I watched this happen to people all the time where you knew that there was something wrong and it was dismissed as hormones or a female thing. Mostly I saw that happen to women. I'm sure it happens to men as well, but I'm just not as familiar with what they're told.
So let
But
me ask you something crazy. So once you got this, diagnosis or, suggestion, did you tell your friends? What did your friends say? Did they say, ah, nah, that, or did they say, oh, that could possibly be right?
Um, I don't think anyone around me really knew what was wrong. They weren't sure what to say. They just knew that I was different, that I had changed. And I was more afraid to eat, more afraid to live because my coordination was off. I couldn't think right. I would, have a difficult time remembering what I was going to say or where I was going. And so they didn't really know. Um, and that's something about this environmental illness that is really difficult, is that in the face of a lot of people who've not been through it, they don't know what to think. And I mean, in many cases, they think that it's in your head as well. And that was funny. One of the doctors that I did end up going to with the environmental illness, he used to laugh and say, "People will tell you that it's all in your head," and he said, "You just tell them, you bet it is." And he would do these scans, and you could see that the spores and stuff were,
There's no
you know,
information.
head, yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
what was the final diagnosis?
I mean, it was definitely mold and mycotoxin.
And
Uh,
so I wanted to say something really quickly with regards to mold. A lot of times mold is overlooked because when you go to the doctors, when you go to the immunologist, when you go to practitioner, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll give you a skin test to see if you have an allergy. And basically, a skin test is a snapshot. It's not a continuum. It doesn't show you whether or not it's a chronic condition. And if it's a chronic condition, it can actually get down into your tissues. So sometimes they have a tissue biopsy, they have a throat scan where they clear out the throat and they can actually look into the throat and see if you have, if the mold has gone into your tissues. And most recently, Stanford has come up with something, I think it's called a liquid biopsy, where they can actually use your blood to test your DNA to see if there's an altercation, such as mold, fungi, which is less evasive, invasive than the first two. But because the other two require you really knowing who you are, knowing your body, knowing the change, like understanding at the core, a lot of times what happens is people just get the simple skin test or the test that will provide immediate shortcut responses, and then they just put them on like Flonase or some type of, antifungal medicine, which may not get to the core of it all. How did you get your assessment? What type of test did they do?
yeah. So the initial doctors, when I finally had someone in this local area that thought it was potentially fungus, they put me on antibiotics and steroids, which apparently is not the way to go. And so that just makes matters worse. Of course, the antibiotic is going to definitely increase issues with the fungus. And yeah, so a lot of people end up burning out their immune system by doing that. So I ended up having to go to a doctor in Texas. And this was an
And you were
environmental.
living where when you went to Texas?
I went where? And
Where were you living when you went to Texas?
I was in Raleigh, North Carolina.
So how far away? Like one, how did you find the doctor in Texas? And two, how far away was the doctor when there's doctors right in your backyard?
Yeah. So it was a an allergist that I had gone to, and he told me that there was a it was his I believe it was his brother had gone through the same thing, and the doctor that is down in Texas was a expert in this. Basically, um, uh, I mean, he was unique because nobody, this doctor up here in North Carolina told me that there was nobody I could go to up here that would be able to help me. He knew that. And he
Wow.
was about the open-minded. He was referred to me by my gynecologist, and she said that he could cause zebras. And
It
so
called
this
what?
man, um, zebras. In other words, I think she meant by that that you know he he can look outside of
Look
he
outside the
I
box.
don't know, has just extra, yeah. And and so it was I went to him, and it was great because he validated that everyone I was going to was not helping, which I recognized. And I
And
had
that you
no
weren't
idea.
crazy and that it wasn't menopause
Sure, right,
and that you weren't
exactly.
paranoid or schizophrenic.
No, I mean, and by the time I'm going to him, this had progressed into the lungs. So, I'm driving around.
Wow.
I had what was called pneumonitis, which I guess, people get pneumonia. Pneumonitis is the next step beyond that. And it was any time that it was in exposure to these particular mycotoxins, it would cause my lungs, the deepest part of your lungs, the tiny little alveoli, to inflame, because that's the response to the trauma is that and to the uh, exposure is to inflame. Well, you can't have the airways back there inflaming because you can't have the crossing of the oxygen and the CO2. So um, it felt like it feels like you're suffocating.
Mm.
So it was absolutely terrifying. Um, Terrifying. And it was like Russian roulette because you didn't know when it was going to happen. It was when you became exposed. So you could be fine in one place, move to a different place, go into a different building, and all of a sudden you're having this reaction, and you basically, you can't breathe. And so anyway, that I was kind of at that stage when I was in North Carolina. And I mean, you can't think right either. You just can't process anything. You feel like you're running with your hair on fire, and you can't put it out, and you don't really know where to go. So I had to figure out a way. When he told me this doctor was in Texas, he had an environmental health center, and I
What is the
figured
name of the center or the doctor?
Dr. Ray was the doctor, and he has passed. He was in his 80s, and he was a also had mold issues himself, and he knew that the medical system, as it was, fully could not save his life. I'm not saying that there's not a place for both. I'm just saying that there just wasn't a lot of uh, there's not a lot of focus on helping people when they have that, because I think it's very difficult for them to diagnose, because you're really not looking at symptoms so much. You have to actually go after the root cause. If you don't get to the root cause for this, I mean, you can die. And like
Yeah.
Dr. Ray down in Texas, he said these are mycotoxins. He said these are biological entities. He said one of the two of you will live, and one of the two of you will die. And so he said, you have to figure out. when you're in exposure, when the reaction starts, and know exactly what to do. And he was a doctor that he tested everything. He was like an inspector and an investigator. He's looking. I mean, he knew everything about what was in my system. He tested every chemical, and we did lung tests. We did blood tests. We did urinalysis. He did scans. There was everything. And I have it looks like a book that shows all of the different chemicals that were still in my system from everything, from nail polish to you name it. Just anything I've ever breathed in the air, in the water, or in the foods. These things accumulate. So, we don't really notice that so much, but in this particular instance, when you have um, exposure to something like molds, and it's the mycotoxins of the molds that are what's so lethal. Of course, the more mold spores you have that are toxic, like black mold, then that you have more mycotoxins. And mycotoxins themselves, when they die, off gas, a chemical. And so it's just very, very difficult to get in front of that when these things start to multiply in your system, and you start getting sick by them.
And you start to normalize it in a way, right? You just okay, I feel a little weak. I'm tired. I'm getting older. You minimize it so that you can keep going. One of the things, two things, the reason why I wanted to talk to you when you said, "Hey, look, let's do this." I was like, "Yeah, okay, let's do this." Is there was a recent news article about uh the spread of fungi, and I can't remember the name of it. It begins with an A, but there are three components of it, but there's going to be a massive spread of it, and it starts with the agricultural component, and then it extends out. And a lot of times we don't think about the agricultural component and the environment, just how it can be transferred. Mold can be transferred from one location to another. And the other thing is that as I started to look up a little bit more about mold, not fungi, but mold. Um, this blew me away. A lot of times people say, "Oh, don't eat that piece of fruit because it's bad." And or just cut that piece off that's bad of the fruit and keep going. Well, the thing is, when you have fruit that is quote unquote bad, like visible bad, when you see what's going on, you have to remember that mold is like a mushroom, where you see the top part, which is the fuzzy, you know, display of something being wrong with the fruit. But mold has roots, so it digs down. Oops, I didn't get my nails done. That's because of the mycotoxins. But as the roots that dig down into the fruit. So as you're eating the fruit, you may be eating the roots, even if you cut off that bad piece. So you have to be very careful as to what you put in your body. And mycotoxins can be carcinogen. They can cause arrhythmia with the heart. They can cause so many different complications. They can cause, um, you know, adverse, negative, depression,
That
anxiety, a lot of different things.
can cause death. Aspergillus, is that what you were referring to?
That's exactly what I was referring to. I was waiting to see if you knew.
Yeah, aspergillus, right. And it is definitely a mold that is in our environment. And there are different species and genus species of aspergillus. And they have their different levels of toxicity. But the I think it was a study that went back. They looked at, this was in England, where they had a whole flock of sheep that died, and they went back and looked, and in the crops that they were feeding the animals, it had become toxic. It basically grew aspergillus, and one of the toxins is aflatoxin, and there are several toxins for aspergillus, but that's what killed all of the animals. It didn't take very long, So you're absolutely right. You have to, and these can be found growing in everything. They can
There
grow
were,
in.
I'm sorry, but there were two crops that they mentioned primarily with regards to mold. I mean, there are multiple ones, but there were two biggies. Do you know what they were?
Probably corn and wheat.
Corn and peanuts. But they said grain. They said
Oh,
grain. They didn't say a particular grain, but
yeah,
corn, corn and peanuts, but also grain. Can you
right.
believe that? Can
Yeah,
think of how many things, and maybe that's why so many people have peanut allergies and they have the anaphylactic shock and they have, it's so severe. But
peanuts in the
think about
ground.
how many things have corn or maltodextrin in it.
Yeah, see, peanuts are in the ground, and so they get wet, and inside the shell, it gets wet, and that's when it starts growing. That now, one of my inspectors for my house did a lot of testing at one of the peanut factories here, and she was called in because they had so many people sick. There may have been a few people who died, and that whole place was it was just consumed in this mold and mycotoxins because they brought the peanuts in, and so it was they're bringing it into the building, and it was growing. So there's more stories on peanuts, but they take the good ones, and they're a certain class, and I could tell you I haven't eaten a peanut since I knew that how dangerous it could be. I'm not allergic to peanuts, but I do know that aflatoxin could be a part of it. I don't give it to my dog as well, which can harm your animals in the same way. Dogs and cats, I mean, animals are also susceptible, and they will usually perish first. So,
Wow. I think along the lines of think of how many athletes they are, right? And, a student athlete,
mm,
bravado, just keep going, ba, 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 ba. And they may have been exposed to mold through, you know, peanuts, corn, whatever it may be, environment, etc. And they're out there and they're on the court, they're on the field, whatever, they're playing, and they feel the tightness in their chest, but they keep going because, what are you, a wuss? What are you, a wimp? Keep going, keep going. You did better than last time. And they're pushing and they're pushing and they're pushing. Are you depressed? Are you anxious? Are you all these different things? Because a lot of times people don't think about the peanut allergy or go to that core, and clinicians may not be testing for the core. I read somewhere it was a very, very high percentage. I don't want to say the number because I don't want to be wrong, and it was one source, not multiple sources. I like to find things from multiple sources. But there's a very, very high percentage of individuals who have a chronic mold allergy that are misdiagnosed or it's overlooked or it takes a long time to get the diagnosis. How long did it take you, Sue, to get the proper diagnosis?
it was when I got to Texas. I mean, I would say that the doctor here knew it was that. I mean, even with the lungs, he did testing just to make sure that it wasn't asthma or anything like that, and it was negative for all of those things. We could do skin testing and things like that, and you can show that you're allergic to certain types, but it's so much deeper than that. So it really took going to the clinic in Texas. Now, this was in 2013, and then it happened in 2010, and
So
it
3 years.
took 3 years. Yeah. I mean, when I was in exposure, all these bizarre symptoms were already happening. It took until 2013 to get to that doctor. I was already out of my place. Soon as soon as I realized what it wasn't a doctor that allowed me to know what it was. There was a friend of mine. He was an older gentleman that I had known, and this was over about a 10-year period of time. And he told me he was always checking the building. He was part of the RTP here, and scientific innovation. And there was a building that he was involved in that kept getting water damage. And so he told me to never forget um, what sick building syndrome was and to look
Wait,
it
wait,
up.
wait. Say it again. Say it a little bit slower.
Mhm. Sick building syndrome.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like that's kind of catchy. Sick
Um,
building syndrome. But when you say it fast, it sounds like, oh my gosh, she's so smart. What did she just say? All right. Hey, not that you're smart anyway. Not that you're smart. You're very, very smart. But I like that. It's like,
I
oh,
don't
sick syndrome.
be smart on this topic. I wish I didn't know anything about it, to be honest with you.
I wish you didn't too.
Yeah, but that is important because a lot of some of the really bad molds are coming from sick buildings. And it's from some of the building materials, um,
Mm.
like drywall, and and it will break down when it gets wet, and some of these, you start to get some of these molds and mycotoxins in your environment from your home and from your offices, etc. So he sick building syndrome. I remember being, when I was getting sick, when I was having those allergy type things, and I tried to drive somewhere. I've never in my life had that. I was in my 40s, and I thought, this is strange. And then all of a sudden, I remembered after I asked so many people, do you have an allergist that I can go to or tell, you know, I was walking my dog in the woods, and we were climbing, and I could not make it to the top. I mean, I was in good shape. I did not, I fight, 30 miles or so. I mean, I was always playing tennis. I don't know how many sets a day. And, and then I can't climb a small hill in Chapel Hill, without panting and feeling like I was going to have a heart attack. So I thought about what he said, and I quickly looked up sick building syndrome, and it will give you all of like detail all of these symptoms or what you can have, and it's coming from a sick building.
Mm.
So and so um, that was my first clue, and from that point on, I was pretty sure that it was mold. So I had my house tested, and that's a whole story in itself. But because I did have water damage, I had a toilet that flowed over. It went into the duct. It was into the exchange unit, and my air return unit had probably, I don't know, gosh, a couple feet of water sitting in the bottom of it. And so um, I had my house tested then, and the gal who knew about the peanut factory, she actually told me that there was enough aspergillus and in my place. She said that it was a limit that was too high, and so once I knew from the testing of the house, I just had to try to find a doctor who could help me. And that's where I went through a lot of issues with people throwing prescriptions at me. And, they just did not understand. And here I have a document that shows that, I'm exposed to these things. And yet nobody cared.
Gave it any credence? They didn't give it any credence.
They didn't, no. And in North Carolina, I mean, I don't know if it's still that way. It might be, but they weren't allowed to talk about mold here. And so they would get run out of the state. So yeah, it would be something other. So, they could name it by the symptom. And again, mold was going to be probably the underlying cause. Um, and then everything else from vascular constriction to brain fog and the inflammation and all that are going to be symptoms. So they treat those, but they're not treating the actual what is it, and that's what is it is what nobody wanted to talk about. So
And
I got
sometimes, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. I
I was
got
just
to
saying, and sometimes the symptom that they try to treat first is quote unquote anything that looks like psychosis, because they're like, if we can get that under control, then we can work on everything else. Well, now
right.
you've tried to medicate me, so now you're really not getting to the core of it. With all this, with this whole process, Are you healed today? This was in 2013. Do you think you're healed today?
2013. And then I ended up, it took me about, after I came back from the environmental health center, it took me about 18 different places until I got into a place that I felt like I could live in. It ended up becoming water damaged itself. So I went
Did you have
through,
it tested, or did you just walk in
oh,
and
oh,
oh
I
my
had,
chest?
no, yeah, I was, this was Chitomium as well. That was in my house as well. Chitomium is one of the black molds, and Stachy was in there as well. And it was in the flooring. It was coming out of the vents because we're not cleaning our vents. This was an apartment complex, and so this was airborne dehydrated chitomium. And the only thing really this time that saved my life on this one was the fact that I went through it before. If I didn't know what I knew, this one was in quantity and type was far worse than what was in my house. The entire flooring was solid mold. And that's because they're using this vinyl plank. And they would tell you it's luxury. It's luxury, I guess, unless it kills you. But if it's on concrete, concrete is porous. Depending on how the builder builds, if it's not protected underneath, then the water is coming up. It's going through that concrete, and these vinyl planks, these vinyl flooring, is actually acting as a vapor barrier, just like you would have in a crawl space. So it's keeping the moisture right there and just growing all this mold. So the underside of every vinyl plank in my place was solid, like army green, black, and white. There is no question it was bad. So the testing, you can have people come out and test. Um,
Who came out to test your location? Who came out
uh,
to test your house?
yeah, I'd have to get the name for you.
Okay, I can put it, guys. I can put it in the description later on.
Yeah, but I think I had a couple people come and look. I had mold testing. You also you want them to check for water damage. Um, and that's what my first inspector for my house told me. You can find molded places. If you have water damage, um, then you have mold. And that's what she told me. She said that you want, because you can't get rid of the mold. You have to get rid of the water damage. It's like cancer. If you can take it out, it needs to come out, and get rid of it. And the same with especially in a building, you've got to get rid of the contaminated materials. Sometimes it means going down to the joists. I mean, you have to get rid of everything. And yeah, so yeah.
Wow. And so I said, as I said, we got like 3 minutes left. But as I said before, I'm looking at my hair. I look like Joan Jett from from the 80s.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to look like this, guys, but it is what it is. We're gonna work with it. Um,
you look great,
the
everyone.
question, please do not tell people how much I paid you to say that. That's between you and I right now. That's between you and I. Um, Quick question. Are you healed today? Like after from 2013 to today, are you healed? Because I want people to understand, is it a take 2 pills and 2 months later I'm healed? Is it a journey? Is it like where are you, would you say?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's a good question. And to answer the thing about a pill, since 2010, except for a dog bite, which I did have to have antibiotics for, I haven't had one pharmaceutical in my system, not one. And that's because that is a chemical. They're all toxins. They're chemicals. So my body can no longer tolerate more chemicals coming in.
Well,
Um,
but wait, when I was reading, there's a intracoxal something, there's an intra something that people take for mold, and there's Flonase. They were recommending like the nose sprays for um mold.
I can't really speak to those because I don't know much about them.
Okay.
I know that what I was advised by my doctor, number one, was get out of exposure. You have
Right.
choice than to get out. It's the hardest thing, especially if it's your home, because that's where you go for protection and security. But sometimes the place that you love the most is the thing that's killing you. And you have to be able to let go of everything, everything, because your things become contaminated. So, and then detoxing yourself. Some of the best detoxes are sweating, not eating any sugar. Sugar will feed mold. Um, lots of water, and you know, basically taking care of yourself in that way. But I am not familiar with any drugs. There are binders, charcoal as a binder,
I read that.
polystyrene, which is a drug. It's used for decreasing high blood pressure. But a benefit of it is that it does absorb toxins and it goes through the blood-brain barrier. So that actually does provide some help. So am I better? Am I healed? I don't know if you ever really heal from this. I still find myself um, not being able to be comfortable almost anywhere because I just don't. It's like an enemy, certain molds, and and um,
Two
and so
minutes.
it's a work in progress, yeah, because it's kind of been traumatic. So I I yeah, just don't know where it's always at. So I know that when I am exposed to something bad, that I'm going to react. I do know though now that if I have to give myself the freedom to get out of exposure. Dr. Ray said he called it the barrel theory. And if you think about a barrel, we all have the ability, we all get exposed to all of this all the time. And the first thing someone is going to say to anyone going through this is, there's mold everywhere. Well, yes, there is. And there are toxins everywhere. But if you get a lot over a short period of time or a little bit over a long period of time, that accumulates and you've not detoxed those out in some way and it builds. If you think of a barrel, if your barrel's full, there's nothing else you can put in. Your system is gonna start. The wiring goes off. Everything just starts going crazy because it cannot handle. Those are poisons, and
That
so
was that was
yeah.
what I was mentioning beforehand, that the big thing with the Stanford testing is they were not able to detect chronic mold exposure. And that is what often gets misdiagnosed is the chronic mold exposure because we adapt, oh, I'm so used to this, I'm so used to this. And it's no longer a shock or it's something that your system has become accustomed to. So anything that you would like to leave with, because I think we probably have about 30 seconds.
Oh, um, just, I guess for anybody who either has this happening to themselves or they have issues that they can't put their finger on, or children that are going through this, or other relatives, look at your environment. Number one, and definitely if you know that you're going through this, test your place, know what kind of molds are bad, and do not be afraid to leave the place that's harming you. You must get out of exposure. You can tell sometimes